Hello there. So, as the World Cup starts today, I've got a little two-for-one review here. There's been a couple of documentaries and things on Netflix in the build-up to this about past World Cups. First one I watched was the about the 2010 World Cup. It's a documentary called "The Bus: A French Football Mutiny," and it basically tells the story of the 2010 French World Cup squad that went into absolute chaos with this. This was probably the more fascinating, I think, of the documentaries. Tells a story about the French manager at the time was Raymond Dominic, and sent Nicolas Anelka home for something, and then the French football team just went into absolute meltdown with that. They were refusing to train. I vaguely remember that they were them refusing to train when all the journalists and everything were there. Um, and I vaguely remember Anelka getting sent home for that. But one thing I didn't know about was that when they refused to train that, and when Dominic took the keys of the bus and didn't let them go for hours or something. It's just absolute craziness there, you know. So in the 2010 World Cup, they really bombed out in the group stage as well. It was mad when you consider they got to the final, the previous one, 2006 one, as well. So it just shows you with that there. But yeah, this was a really fascinating documentary. Like I said, I remember the stuff about them refusing to train and the whole bust up with the captain at the time, Patrice Evra, and things. But I didn't know about the bus thing. That's one thing I didn't know. I must have either forgot about it or never heard about that. So that was quite fascinating with that. It was really interesting as well. This Raymond Dominic was not particularly well liked within the squad. And nobody seems to be interested. Nobody seems to have a good word about him. And another thing I didn't know about in the previous tournament, Euro 2008, I do remember this. France got bombed out in the group stages of that as well. But I didn't know about this. See, on the night they got put out in this post-match interview, I think for French TV, he basically then proposes to his girlfriend at the time, and that she had no idea he was going to do this as well. She's kind of feels awkward as well. I think she says his ex now, but she feels really awkward, and you can see how awkward she felt about it. So, some character, this guy. And it's remarkable he actually kept his job, though, when you think about it. I mean, because they were really poor in Euro 2008. So the fact that he even got the chance to go to 2010, now, of course, got to the final, of course, in 2006. But yeah, but speaking of Euro 2008 and the qualifiers for that, they actually lost twice to Scotland, believe it or not. It's just unbelievable. But of course, then Scotland went and lost to Georgia on that, and then the closest Scotland had came to qualifying for a tournament in recent years before they actually started qualifying for like Euro 2020, and that was probably 2008 when they had the two World Cup finalists in their group, Italy and France, plus a good Ukraine side, which had a Peach Shevchenko there. So, and yet that was the closest they'd come. And then when they're in a lesser group, they do even worse. So, whatever. That's Scotland for you. What can I say? But anyway, that's enough. Oh, another funny thing is, speaking of connection to Scottish football, I do always think that Raymond Dominic looks a bit like Martin O'Neill. No, seriously, I mean it, I really do. The French Martin O'Neill. "No, seriously, I mean it, I really do." Yeah, that's enough shit impressions. Okay, the next documentary is about the Brazil 1994 team. I think it's called Brazil USA 94, Brazil's Return to Glory or something like that. Um, this one was pretty. This one wasn't as interesting, but it still had its interesting moments as well. To speak about it, one of the things that really struck me was this happened. Um, the USA '94 World Cup happened just weeks after Ayrton Senna had died in the Brazilian F1 driver had died in that terrible crash in one of the Grand Prix. So the country was in a state of mourning for losing a sporting icon that I don't really follow Formula One, but Ayrton Senna is one of those ones you know who he is, even if you don't watch Formula One the same way you know who Messi and Ronaldo is, even if you don't like football and things like that. So it was a real shocker, and you can tell the country was obviously in a state of mourning, and Brazil hadn't won a World Cup for a good few years as well. They're kind of like now actually. It's been a long time now since they last won one. So they weren't particularly well fancied. There was a lot of pressure on them going into that, and they lost like the first. I didn't realise this in the qualifying for this. They lost to Bolivia, who Scotland dubbed 4-0 in a friendly the other day. So different times, of course, you know. But Yeah, they lost that was the first time they'd ever lost a World Cup qualifier, so that was a real shocker for them. But there was a lot of pressure on them going into this World Cup, and they were kind of just, yeah, moseying along. They beat USA 1-0. I think it was in the last 16. It was a really tight game as well. With that, then they had a pretty cracking quarter final against Holland that they won 3-2. Eventually, they got to the final and played Italy. And Italy was, Serie A was really quite peak at that time. You had that was peak AC Milan. You had Roberto Baggio at his best there as well. Of course, he would be the one that would miss the last penalty as well, blazing it over the bar with that. So I just show you it happens to the best of us as well. So, one thing I'd forgotten about is Italy kind of struggled through as well, because I do remember they lost to Republic of Ireland at that World Cup in their first game, but they got through as one of the best third place teams as well. And they were one of the favourites going in, but they got through as one of the best third place teams, which is remarkable when you think about it. You know, so, but yeah, yeah. So both teams weren't exactly setting the heather alight there. But of course, one other thing I remember is, look at the last World Cup. Argentina lost to Saudi Arabia in the first game that they played, so and then went on to win it. So yeah, there you go. It is what it is. So really interesting documentaries. If you're into football, well worth checking out. Anyway, thanks for taking the time to listen, and goodbye.